A Dutch nurse lost her job to save a homeless American man's life. When he showed up as CEO millionaire, everyone was in tears. Rain poured relentlessly over the dimly lit streets of Amsterdam, washing away the footprints of those who had passed before. The cold air carried the scent of wet stone and distant cigarette smoke. The city, usually alive with chatter and the rhythmic hum of bicycles, felt eerily quiet at this hour. Isabel pulled her coat tighter around her as she walked home from the hospital, exhaustion weighing down her every step. The shift had been long, filled with the usual chaos of the emergency ward, broken bones, feverish children, elderly patients clinging to life. She had seen it all, but nothing prepared her for what she saw next. Under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, a man sat hunched beneath a shop's awning, his body trembling violently. His tattered coat was soaked through, his bare hands gripping his knees as though holding himself together. His head hung low, dark strands of hair clinging to his pale forehead. Something in Isabel's chest tightened. She had seen plenty of homeless people in the city before, some begging, some wandering aimlessly, but this man wasn't just homeless. He was sick. She hesitated for only a second before stepping closer. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. The man barely lifted his head. His eyes, shadowed with exhaustion and fever, flickered up at her with fleeting annoyance. "Go away," he muttered, his voice hoarse and weak. Isabel didn't move. Up close she could see the severity of his condition. His skin was deathly pale, beads of sweat clinging to his forehead despite the freezing temperature. His breathing was labored, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was a fever. A serious one. Acting on instinct, she reached out, pressing the back of her hand lightly against his forehead. Burning. Her heart clenched. He was dangerously hot. "You have a high fever," she said urgently. "You need medical help." He let out a weak, humorless chuckle. "I'll be fine." Isabel narrowed her eyes. "No, you won't." She reached for her phone, quickly dialing emergency services. The man's eyes fluttered closed, his body swaying slightly as if he barely had the strength to sit upright. Isabel bit her lip, pressing the phone harder against her ear. "Ambulance, please," she said. As soon as the dispatcher answered, "I have an unconscious man with a high fever, possible infection. He needs immediate care." She rattled off the location, her pulse quickening. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the rain. Two paramedics stepped out of the ambulance, their bright yellow uniforms standing out against the night. Isabel exhaled in relief. Finally, he'll get help. One of the paramedics, a tall man with graying hair, crouched beside the homeless man and did a quick assessment. His brow furrowed. "He's burning up," he muttered to his partner. "But we need to check something first." The second paramedic, a woman in her late 30s, turned to Isabel. "Does he have any identification? Any medical history?" Isabel frowned. No. I don't think so, but he's clearly sick. You have to take him." The paramedic sighed. "We can't." Isabel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean you can't?" The older paramedic stood up, shaking his head. "No ID, no insurance, no paperwork. He doesn't qualify for transport under hospital policy. We can't admit undocumented patients unless it's a critical emergency." Isabel stared at them in disbelief. "This is a critical emergency. Look at him." The female paramedic exhaled, glancing at the sick man with something almost like regret. "I'm sorry. If he were unconscious or coding, we could take him in, but right now we legally can't." The words hit Isabel like a punch to the gut. They were going to leave him here to die. She turned back to the man, who had barely moved. His body sagged against the wall, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. If she let him stay here, he wouldn't make it through the night. Something inside her snapped. "Fine," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "I'll take him myself." The paramedics exchanged glances but didn't argue. As soon as the ambulance drove away, Isabel crouched beside the man again. "Listen to me," she said, gripping his ice-cold hand. "I know you don't trust me, but if you don't come with me now, you're not going to make it." His lips parted slightly, but no words came. He was too weak to fight her. That was enough. With strength she didn't know she had, Isabel hooked her arms under his and hoisted him to his feet. He let out a soft groan, his legs barely holding his weight. "Just hold on," she murmured, half dragging, half carrying him down the street. The hospital was only a few blocks away. She could get him inside before anyone noticed. Every step was a battle. By the time she reached the hospital's back entrance, sweat had mixed with the rain on her forehead. Her breath came out in ragged gasps, her arms trembling under his weight. She looked around, making sure no one was watching. Then, with her last bit of strength, she pushed through the doors, pulling him inside. The bright fluorescent lights stung her eyes. The air smelled of antiseptic and sterile linens. For a moment, no one noticed them. Then a nurse looked up from the reception desk, and her eyes widened in shock. Isabel? Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had just broken every rule in the hospital's book. And if anyone found out, she was going to lose everything. Isabel's pulse pounded in her ears as she pushed open the door to an empty patient room, her grip tightening around the nearly unconscious man beside her. His body sagged against her, too weak to hold himself up. Just a little further. She half-dragged, half-carried him to the hospital bed and eased him down, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rainwater dripped from their soaked clothes onto the pristine white sheets, but she didn't have time to care. She grabbed a thermometer from the bedside stand and pressed it against his burning forehead. A few seconds later, the numbers flashed, 104.1 dec 40°C. Her stomach clenched. Way too high. She moved quickly, retrieving an ice pack from a nearby storage unit and pressing it against the back of his neck. His eyelids fluttered, a quiet groan slipping from his lips. "Stay with me," she murmured, shaking his shoulder gently. He didn't respond. Panic surged in her chest, but she forced it down. "Focus. Do what you were trained to do." She grabbed an IV kit and swiftly inserted a needle into the crook of his arm, attaching a saline drip to rehydrate him. His skin was clammy, his breathing uneven. He needs antibiotics. Now. But there was a problem. The pharmacy wouldn't dispense any medication without proper documentation, and this man had no records, no ID, nothing. Her mind raced. She knew it was wrong. Forging medical records was a serious offense. But if she didn't, this man would die. Her fingers trembled as she pulled up the hospital database and created a new entry under a false name. Daniel Carter, age 34. Admitted for severe bacterial infection. Requires immediate antibiotic treatment. She printed the document, signed it, and rushed to the pharmacy counter. The night shift pharmacist barely glanced at the paper before handing her a vial of intravenous antibiotics. It worked. Tie. She hurried back, filled a syringe, and injected the medication into Daniel's IV. Now, all she could do was wait. The minutes stretched into hours. Isabel sat in the chair beside Daniel's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. His fever hadn't broken yet, but his breathing was steadier. She had done everything she could. The risk she had taken was enormous. If anyone found out, she wouldn't just be reprimanded, she would lose her job, her license, everything. But she didn't regret it. A soft knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. Her head snapped up just as Sophie, a fellow nurse and close friend, peeked inside. Isabel's heart stopped. Sophie's gaze flickered from Isabel to the man on the bed, then to the IV drip. Her expression tightened. "Isabel, what did you do?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then Sophie stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "You faked a patient file, didn't you?" she whispered. Isabel swallowed hard. He would have died out there. Sophie ran a hand through her hair, exhaling sharply. "Damn it, Isabel, do you know what's going to happen if they find out?" "Yes," Isabel said, voice steady. "But I'd rather lose my job than let someone die because of bureaucracy." Sophie stared at her for a long moment. Then, to Isabel's shock, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "I didn't see anything." Relief flooded through Isabel. She hadn't expected anyone to understand. Sophie turned to leave but paused at the door. "Just be careful." Isabel gave a small, grateful nod. But deep down, she knew this secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. The next morning, Daniel's fever finally broke. His breathing was stronger, his color returning. When he opened his eyes, they were clearer than before. He was awake. "Hey," Isabel said softly, a tired smile tugging at her lips. He blinked, his gaze slowly focusing on her. "Where?" "You're in the hospital," she explained. "You were very sick, but you're going to be okay." He stared at her, confusion flickering across his face. "You did this?" She nodded. His eyes darkened. "Why?" She hesitated. How could she explain? Before she could answer, the door slammed open. A hospital administrator stormed inside, 2 senior doctors following close behind. Isabel's heart plummeted. They knew. Nurse Van Dijk, the administrator's cold voice rang through the room. Step outside. Now. Wow. Isabel stood before the hospital board, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The room was silent, suffocating. Finally, the director leaned forward. Do you deny forging hospital records? She didn't flinch. No. A murmur rippled through the panel. The director's jaw tightened. You deliberately falsified information, administered unauthorized medication, and occupied hospital resources without clearance. Do you understand how severe these violations are? I understand, Isabel said, her voice steady. But I also understand that if I hadn't done those things, a man would have died. A long silence followed. Then, the director sighed, shaking his head. Your medical skills are commendable, Nurse Van Dijk, but rules exist for a reason. You have left us no choice. The words hit like a bullet. You're fired. For a moment, everything went still. Isabel had known this was coming. She had accepted it the moment she made her decision. But hearing it, feeling the weight of those words crash down on her, was something else entirely. Her hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. Fine. She turned to leave. But before she stepped out, she glanced back at the board. One day you'll realize that saving a life should matter more than hospital policies. And with that, she walked away, jobless, but without regret. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing Daniel became aware of when he drifted back into consciousness. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nose, and soft light filtered in through the hospital window. His body ached, his limbs felt heavy, but the fever-induced haze that had clouded his mind for days had finally lifted. He blinked, his gaze slowly focusing on the room around him. Clean white walls. An IV drip attached to his arm. A glass of water on the bedside table. Then, his eyes landed on her. The woman who had saved him. Isabel sat in a chair beside the bed, her posture slightly slumped from exhaustion. She must have been there for hours. Days, maybe? As if sensing his gaze, she stirred. When her eyes met his, relief flooded her expression. You're awake, she breathed, offering him a small smile. Daniel's throat was dry, scratchy, but he forced out a whisper. Where am I? The hospital. She reached for the water and helped him drink. You had a severe infection, but you're stable now. Daniel took a slow sip, the cool liquid soothing the rawness in his throat. His mind was still foggy, but something felt off. A flicker of memory returned. Rain, cold, collapsing on the street. And then, her. You, his voice came out rough. He swallowed and tried again. You brought me here. Isabel hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Daniel frowned. Something about the way she said it made his stomach twist. What's wrong? He asked, his voice still weak but laced with suspicion. Isabel exhaled slowly. Daniel, I need to tell you something. There was something in her eyes, something heavy. And then, she said the words that knocked the breath from his lungs. I lost my job because of you. Silence. For a moment, Daniel thought he had misheard her. What? His voice barely rose above a whisper. The hospital found out that I admitted you without proper documentation, Isabel explained gently. I broke the rules. And they fired me for it. Daniel's breath hitched. His chest tightened, a crushing weight settling over him. She had risked everything for him. And she had paid the price. His hands clenched into weak fists against the blanket. Why? Isabel tilted her head, watching him carefully. Because you were dying, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Her words were simple, honest, as if it was the most natural decision in the world. But to Daniel, it made no sense. Nobody did things like that, not for him. Not anymore. His heart pounded. His fingers dug into the sheets. You shouldn't have done that. And let you die? Isabel challenged. Yes. Daniel's voice cracked, but it was filled with something raw. You don't even know me. You, he broke off, his throat constricting. You shouldn't have thrown away your life for someone like me. Isabel's brows knitted together. Someone like you. Daniel swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to his trembling hands. I used to be someone, he murmured. A long pause. Then, softly, tell me. Daniel exhaled shakily. He hadn't spoken these words in years, had buried them deep under shame and bitterness. But looking at Isabel, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, he realized she deserved to know. So he told her. He told her, Daniel Carter. Once his name had meant something. He had been a successful entrepreneur in New York, a rising star in the business world. He had built a multi-million-dollar startup from nothing, earning the respect of investors and colleagues alike. And then he lost it all. A business partner he trusted had betrayed him, embezzling millions and leaving the company in ruins. Legal battles followed, but Daniel had been blindsided. His accounts were drained, his assets seized. Within months, he went from a wealthy CEO to a man with nothing but the clothes on his back. The downward spiral was fast. Too fast. With no money, no support system, and no safety net, he ended up on the streets. 1 month turned into 3. Then a year. Then more. By the time he reached Amsterdam, he was a shadow of the man he had once been. When he finished, silence filled the room. Isabel didn't speak right away. She just looked at him. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with understanding. And that was almost worse. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for everything you went through." Daniel shook his head. "Don't be. It was my fault. I was reckless. I trusted the wrong people." Isabel studied him carefully. "And what now?" Daniel blinked. "What? What are you going to do now?" she asked, tilting her head. "You can't stay in this hospital forever. And I don't think you're the type of man who gives up easily." Daniel let out a hollow laugh. "You think I have a choice?" Isabel's expression hardened. "You always have a choice." Her words hit deep. For so long he had let life happen to him. He had been stuck in survival mode, just trying to make it to the next day. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to fight back. No more running. No more excuses. It was time to reclaim his life. And he would do it his way, without handouts, without charity. He had lost everything before. Now, he would rebuild. A week later, Daniel took his first steps out of the hospital. His body was still weak, but his mind had never been clearer. He had to start somewhere. He applied for jobs, any job. Bartender, delivery driver, warehouse worker. It didn't matter. He just needed a foot in the door. And then, one afternoon, everything changed. He was walking through a cafe when he heard a voice behind him, one he hadn't heard in years. "Daniel Carter? No way. It can't be." Daniel turned sharply. Standing there, wide-eyed with disbelief, was Michael Reynolds, a former colleague and friend from his past life. Michael had been one of the few people Daniel had truly respected in the business world. They had worked together years ago before everything fell apart. And now, Michael looked at him not with pity, but with recognition. "You're alive." Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. "Barely." Michael studied him for a moment. Then, suddenly, he smiled. "Come with me." Daniel frowned. "Where?" Michael's grin widened. "Back to where you belong." And just like that, Daniel was given the second chance he never thought he'd get. Daniel stood in front of the glass doors of Reynolds' company, his reflection staring back at him. He barely recognized the man looking back. His clothes were still second-hand, his frame still lean from months of hardship, but his eyes. For the first time in years, they held determination instead of defeat. Michael Reynolds had given him an opportunity. Not as a favor, not out of pity, but because he believed that Daniel Carter still had something to offer the business world. "You start at the bottom," Michael had said firmly when he brought Daniel into the company. "No special treatment, no shortcuts. You earn your way back." And Daniel wouldn't have had it any other way. So he did. Daniel took the first job he was offered, an entry-level position in data analysis. It was humbling. The man who once sat in boardrooms with millionaires now sat in a cramped cubicle, crunching numbers and organizing spreadsheets. He worked late nights, took on extra assignments, and never complained. He didn't expect respect, he earned it. Colleagues who had initially dismissed him as just another employee started noticing his work ethic. His managers took note of his sharp instincts. The fire that had once made him a great entrepreneur was still there, it had just been buried under years of hardship. By the end of the first year, he had earned a promotion. By the second year, he was leading a team. By the fifth, he had become one of the company's top strategists. But no matter how much success he gained, he never forgot the woman who had saved his life. Throughout the years, Daniel and Isabel stayed in touch. At first, it was just occasional check-ins, a text message here, a phone call there. But over time, it became something more. "How's the new job?" Isabel would ask. "I'm surviving," Daniel would joke. "What about you?" And that was where the conversation always turned heavy. Because Isabel was struggling. After being fired, she had tried applying to other hospitals. but her reputation had followed her. "You knowingly violated hospital policy," one rejection letter had read. "We cannot risk hiring someone with a history of unprofessional conduct." No one wanted to hire a nurse who had gone against protocol, even if it had been to save a life. So she had settled for a small clinic, a low-paying, understaffed facility that barely gave her enough to get by. Daniel hated it. She had sacrificed everything for him, and now she was the one suffering. So he made a vow to himself. One day, when he was strong enough, successful enough, he would repay her, no matter what it took. The years passed, and Daniel Carter became unstoppable. With each promotion, he climbed higher. With each deal he closed, his reputation grew. His instincts, his resilience, his ability to see opportunities where others saw dead ends, they made him invaluable. And then, finally, it happened. Michael Reynolds stepped down as CEO. There was no question about who would replace him. The board voted unanimously. Daniel Carter became the CEO of Reynolds Company. It should have been the happiest moment of his life. But as he stood in his new office, looking out over the city skyline, all he could think about was her. Isabel, the woman who had once sat beside him in a hospital room, who had lost everything for him, who had never once asked for anything in return. It was time to keep his promise. It was time to find her. The wheels of Daniel's private jet touched down at Amsterdam Airport, the hum of the engines filling the cabin as he stared out at the city that had once been his lowest point. The last time he was here, he had nothing, not even hope. Now, he was stepping onto Dutch soil as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Yet, wealth and success meant nothing at this moment. He had come for one reason, Isabel? She had saved his life, given up her own career to do so. And now, after all these years, he would finally keep his promise. As the car took him through the city, he thought back to the nights he had spent on these same streets, cold and alone. Back then, no one had seen him. No one but her. And now, it was his turn to find her. Daniel had spent weeks searching. With the resources he had now, finding someone should have been easy. But Isabel Van Dijk was not on social media. There were no recent records of her working at a major hospital. It was as if she had disappeared. Then, finally, one of his private investigators came back with an address. A small community clinic in a poorer district of Amsterdam. Daniel frowned as he looked at the report. Why was she working at such a low-paying job? Then he saw the answer in the details. After she had been fired, no major hospital would hire her again. Rage burned in his chest. They had cast her aside for saving a life. Daniel tightened his grip on the folder. That was about to change. The small clinic was nothing like the high-end hospitals where Isabel had once worked. The walls were old, the waiting room crowded with patients who couldn't afford private care. Daniel walked through the entrance, his polished black shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He was out of place here, his tailored suit, his expensive watch, the quiet confidence that came with success. Heads turned. The receptionist looked up, startled by the presence of a man who clearly didn't belong in a struggling clinic. But Daniel's eyes were searching for only one person. And then, he saw her. She was standing at the far end of the hall, flipping through a patient file. Even after all these years, she hadn't changed. Her auburn hair was still tied back in a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping around her face. Her eyes were just as sharp, just as filled with determination. And when she finally looked up and saw him, everything stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world around them faded. Then, slowly, Isabel's eyes widened. She froze. Daniel took a step forward. She took a step back, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Daniel?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel smiled. "It's been a long time, Isabel." Isabel's mind spun. The man standing in front of her was not the weak, fever-ridden figure she had carried into the hospital years ago. This man was powerful, confident, successful. His suit alone probably cost more than her monthly salary. The way he carried himself, the way people around them stared in quiet awe, told her everything she needed to know. He was no longer a homeless man. He was someone important. Important. Her heart pounded in disbelief. What, how? Daniel's gaze softened. "It's a long story. But let's just say I finally got my life back together." Isabel's breath shook. She had dreamed of this moment so many times, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he had survived. And now he was here, standing in front of her, looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. She swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" Daniel's smile faded slightly. His voice was lower, more serious. "Because I never forgot what you did for me." The weight of those words settled in her chest. Daniel took another step forward. "And now, it's my turn to help you." The silence in the clinic was deafening. Every staff member had paused in their work, their eyes shifting between Isabel and the impeccably dressed man standing in the middle of their modest hallway. Daniel Carter, a name that, until now, belonged to her past, to the man she had once found freezing on the streets, the man she had risked everything to save. But this man was different. He stood tall, radiating quiet authority, exuding confidence. He didn't just survive, he had conquered. And now, he was here. For her. Daniel turned to face the clinic staff, his voice steady, his words deliberate. "Many years ago, I was lost. I had nothing. No home, no hope, no future. And while the rest of the world looked away, there was one person who didn't." His eyes found Isabel's, filled with something deep and unspoken. "She didn't just save my life, she gave me a second chance." A murmur rippled through the clinic. Isabel felt heat rise to her cheeks as whispers spread among her colleagues. Daniel continued, his voice unwavering. "But in saving me, she lost everything. She was cast aside for choosing compassion over bureaucracy." He turned back to the crowd. "Tell me, is that the kind of world we want to live in? A world where a healer is punished for doing what she was meant to do?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Some of the younger nurses nodded subtly, their expressions filled with admiration. Even the senior doctor standing in the corner looked away, guilt flashing in his eyes. Isabel felt overwhelmed. She had never expected recognition. She had never asked for gratitude. But hearing these words, spoken aloud for everyone to hear, made something in her chest tighten painfully. And he changed her life. Again, Daniel stepped closer, his voice softer now, but just as powerful. "I came here today for one reason." The entire clinic held its breath. Then, he spoke the words that shook Isabel to her core. "I want to give you a hospital." Gasps filled the room. Isabel's own breath caught in her throat. What?" she stammered. Daniel's expression didn't waver. "I want to fund a hospital, your hospital. A place where you can help people the way you were always meant to, without worrying about policies or profit margins." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The idea was too big, too impossible. "Daniel, I. No restrictions," he continued, cutting through her hesitation. "You make the rules. You decide who gets care. No one will ever be turned away because of money or paperwork." Her mind spun. A hospital that truly belonged to her. One where she could treat the people who needed it most, without bureaucracy getting in the way. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. But, her throat felt tight. "Daniel, this is too much." The emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She shook her head, stepping back slightly. "I can't take this." Daniel frowned. "Why not?" "Because it's not right," she whispered. "I saved you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted something in return." His expression softened. "Isabel, this isn't about paying you back. This is about giving you the chance to do what you were meant to do." She swallowed hard, her pulse racing. "I don't want charity," she admitted. Daniel took a slow step forward, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "And I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a partnership." Her breath hitched. "You once gave me a chance to stand on my own again," Daniel continued. "Now, I'm giving you yours." The sincerity in his voice shattered the last of her resistance. This wasn't about debt. This wasn't about charity. This was about believing in each other. Slowly, the weight on her chest lifted. And for the first time in a long time, she said yes. The new hospital was more than just a building. It was a testament to everything Isabel had fought for. She poured herself into it, working tirelessly to ensure that no one was ever turned away, that no other nurse would have to make the impossible choice she had. And through it all, Daniel was there. He didn't just fund the hospital and disappear. He stayed. Meetings, paperwork, negotiations, he handled it all effortlessly, standing beside her every step of the way. And somewhere between the late-night strategy sessions, the shared cups of coffee, and the moments when she caught him watching her with something unspoken in his eyes, Isabel began to feel it. That pull. That quiet, terrifying realization that this was no longer just about gratitude. She was falling for him. One evening, after another exhausting day at the hospital, Daniel invited Isabel to dinner. They sat in a quiet restaurant by the canals, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the water. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and fresh rain. She had been expecting another business discussion, but as she stirred her wine absent-mindedly, Daniel spoke. "You do realize I'm not here because of the hospital, right?" She glanced up, startled. "What?" His gaze was steady. "I didn't come back just to fulfill a promise. I came back because of you." Her breath caught. Daniel leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I've built businesses. I've made millions, but none of it has ever meant as much to me as you do." Her hands tightened around her glass. "Daniel, you don't have to say anything," he cut in gently. "I just need you to know this isn't about owing you. It never was." His voice was quiet but certain. "I'm here because I want to be, because I choose you." Isabel's heart pounded, but fear still clung to her. Was this real? Or was it just the echoes of their past, pulling them together in a way neither of them could resist? She couldn't risk misreading this. So instead of answering, she looked away. Days passed. Then weeks. Daniel never pushed, never asked again. He let her work through it on her own, let her decide, because that's who he was. But no matter how much she tried to fight it, no matter how much she told herself it was too complicated, too messy, too tied to the past, her heart already knew the truth, because every time she heard his voice, every time she saw his name on her phone, every time he walked into a room, her world steadied. And wasn't that what love was supposed to feel like? Not chaos, not obligation, just home. One night, Isabel found herself standing outside Daniel's office. He was sitting at his desk, lost in thought, rubbing his temple the way he always did when he was overworked. She knocked lightly. He looked up, surprised. "Isabel?" She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "I've been afraid." Daniel set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "Of what?" She exhaled. "That what we have is just tied to what happened years ago. That maybe you're here because of what I did, not because of who I am." A flicker of understanding crossed his face. "And now?" he asked softly. She stepped closer. "Now, I know that's not true." She met his gaze, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. He wasn't here because he owed her. He was here because he loved her. And she loved him too. Daniel's breath hitched slightly, but he didn't move. He was still waiting. Always waiting for her to decide. So this time, Isabel didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and kissed him. And just like that, the last of her fears melted away. The hospital opened its doors on a crisp spring morning, the golden light of dawn spilling through the glass windows as patients, doctors, and staff moved through its halls. It was Isabel's dream come true. But this time she didn't build it alone. Standing beside her was Daniel, no longer the lost man she had once saved, but a partner, an equal, someone who had chosen to stand with her, not out of gratitude but out of love. She had finally accepted that this wasn't a debt to be repaid. It was a shared purpose, a shared life. And in that, she had found something even more precious than the hospital itself. She had found him. It happened on an ordinary evening. No grand gestures. No extravagant settings. Just the two of them on the rooftop of the hospital, overlooking the city they had both fought to call home again. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and turned to her with a look so steady, so certain it stole her breath away. "Marry me, Isabel." Her heart clenched. Psst. Years ago she had found him in the rain, lost and broken. Now he stood before her, whole and strong, not as a man seeking salvation, but as a man who simply wanted her. No conditions, no debts, just love. A slow smile spread across her lips. "Yes." Daniel exhaled softly, almost as if he had been holding that breath for years. And when he slid the ring onto her finger, Isabel knew. This was exactly where she was meant to be. Together they changed lives. The hospital flourished, helping those who had nowhere else to turn. But more than that, Isabel and Daniel built a life that was full, not just of work, but of laughter, of quiet evenings, of a love that had been tested and had only grown stronger. Because one act of kindness had created something neither of them had ever expected. A love that had saved both of them. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. And so Isabel's kindness didn't just save a life, it changed two lives forever. She had acted with compassion, never expecting anything in return. But sometimes, the universe has a way of rewarding those who give selflessly. Daniel didn't just rebuild his life, he built a future with the woman who had saved him. This story is a reminder that one act of kindness can set off a chain of events greater than we can ever imagine. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartwarming tales of resilience, love, and the power of human kindness. Because sometimes, a single story can change the way we see the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story. See you in the next one.